Katherine Stone from Injury Florida Law is back with us to talk about workers' compensation and specific jobs that may not be covered if one is injured on the job. So this sounds like an interesting one. Katherine, how are you today?
Good, how are you?
I am well. So something caught your attention that you were like, hey, people think that they've got workers' compensation in their back pocket, but may not be the case.
Well, you know, in the state of Florida, if you have part-time or full-time employees of 4 or more, you are legally required as an entity to carry workers' compensation insurance.
Okay.
There's obviously exceptions to that rule, and that exception list can be very lengthy. One of the exceptions is construction industry cases. So pretty much anyone that walks on a job site could be covered, regardless if that employer only has 1 or 2 employees. But what I really wanted to talk about today was the equine industry. So I have horses, I show horses quite a lot, and I recently had a client come to me who was a jockey and was injured while performing jockey duties. And you know, it's interesting that the statute says when you're looking at the independent contractors, so for instance, like Uber drivers and Uber Eats drivers, they're considered independent contractors. Jockeys and equestrian, ranch hands, farm workers, you know, people who clean the stalls, they actually are considered employees unless there is a written contract of employment that indicates that they are independent contractors.
Okay, so I want to make sure I get this straight. So they are considered employees unless there is the contract.
Correct.
I would kind of think would be the other way around. So I think that's interesting, first and foremost.
So they are considered employees, again, so long as the farm or the ranch, wherever you're working, has 4 or more full or part-time employees. And but in a particular case that I have going on right now, there was no contract of employment. And so we're obviously arguing that that they should be considered an employee for purposes of workers' compensation. And so the statute's very clear that if you don't have that contract specifically stating that you're an independent contractor, that they should be covered under the system.
And I just think of jockeys, for instance. I mean, you do hear of getting injuries, and of course that goes with construction workers. You hear of injuries there.
And
so
a lot of racetracks require that anyone walking onto the property to be a jockey or handle the horses or anything to do with the horses shows proof that they are covered under someone's workers' comp policy. And although things fall through the cracks and maybe the person at the gate doesn't ask for that proof of coverage. So it's kind of like a construction site as well. Everyone walking on a construction site is supposed to show proof of coverage. Doesn't always happen.
So let's talk about the independent contractors that are out there and use the, you know, example of the jockey that you were talking about. What advice do you give them if you're in a situation like that and you're thinking about work and you're like, oh man, this is hitting home for me right now. They're watching the
Well, obviously, if you've approached the employer and asked for the work comp insurance, there is a database that the state of Florida has that you can look up your employer and determine whether or not your employer has workers' comp coverage. So that's the first thing that we always look at. Unlike the construction industry, we obviously, if your employer doesn't have workers' comp insurance and they're supposed to have, well, there's different ramifications for them with regards to that. We call them an uninsured employer for purposes of filing a claim. It just means that the case isn't going to work the way it normally would if there was an insurance company that's going to authorize a doctor and start paying biweekly checks. When you have an uninsured employer, the game is a little different.
And again, it just that question you were able to get, you know, working with this jockey, you're seeing what avenues are out there. And I think that's one thing we can't stress enough is that people do have questions or find themselves in a situation that's unexpected. That's where getting someone like yourself is a smart move. And we want to make sure and go ahead and share your phone number so people can get in touch with you. There's it is on your screen, also your website as well. Katherine, thanks for coming in and talking about this one today.
Thank you.